Welcome back to AM Northwest. His work is instantly recognizable, revolutionizing comic book culture and influencing a generation of readers and cartoonists. Here to share his new biography, Crumb, we welcome author Dan Nadel. Good to have you with us, Dan.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, Robert Crumb. I mean, his work stands out. I think about Keep On Trucking as kind of the one that everyone probably knows, his cartoons. Why were you influenced by him, and why did you want to write his biography?
Well, I discovered Robert Crumb when I was probably a little too young, when I was like 13 or 14 years old.
Wow.
And it really struck me. It seemed instantly familiar and also a perfect thing for a slightly alienated teenager to latch on to. And so as I got older and I started writing about comics and art, he just seemed like the perfect vehicle to tell a larger story about comics, about the counterculture, about drawing, through his own just incredible life, you know, back and forth across the country.
Right.
And his vision of America that's so compelling.
Wasn't he kind of like the first adult comic illustrator?
He was the first person to take the comic book and essentially make it a place for any kind of expression.
Right.
So, you know, autobiography, social satire,
right,
anything that would essentially be for adults, for grown-ups. And that led to graphic novels and things like that, absolutely.
Now, as a feminist myself, I can look back and see he drew some kind of misogynistic things, some racist things, but he admits to you that he did that, and he wanted you to include all of his faults.
Yes, that was the condition for my being allowed to write the book.
Yeah.
Was that I not gloss over that I really investigate it. And I think it's really important because people will say, well, it was a product of its time, or everybody was like that. And yes, you have to take it as part of its time in the late 60s, the intentional taboo breaking. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the work can be very troublesome and troubling. And so it feels important to address that from today's perspective, not to reduce it or excuse it, but to really examine it and think about, you know, how it resonates now. In some cases, it still resonates as a warning against misogyny and against
right,
racism,
right,
which was partly his point, but it also is difficult to look at.
Yes, absolutely. Tell me about Zap, the comic book Zap that he came up with.
Zap Comics was Robert's first comic book published in February 1968. And his dream starting in the mid-1960s was to somehow have his own comic book that he would publish or he'd publish with friends of his. And it would contain anything he wanted. It would be a place where he could do whatever he wanted with comics. And it had to be a comic book, not a newspaper strip, right, or anything like that.
Right.
It had to take this medium of his youth that was considered so beneath contempt and revitalize it. So Zap was something that he basically published himself, working with a couple friends, and then sold himself in San Francisco starting in February of 1968. And it just basically revolutionized the medium. It's by the end of 1968, because of Zap and some other things, he basically is published around the world.
Wow.
In newspapers and books and everywhere else.
All right. What is he like as a person? I know he had a really tough childhood, right?
Yes, he
What
did.
is he like?
Robert
He lives in Paris now, right?
He lives in the south of France.
Okay.
Robert is very warm. He's very funny, extremely sharp, and with it. But at the same time, he needs quiet, but he's also very, very present. He's in the moment at all times. And
he's in his 80s now, right?
He's 81.
81.
Yeah.
You also write that he's very charismatic.
He is.
Which, no offense, but when you look at the pictures he's drawn of himself,
I know.
What?
Well,
although charisma doesn't have to do necessarily with your looks.
Or even with your self-image.
Okay.
But part of Robert's charisma is that he is so present, that he's spent so much time thinking about himself and making work about himself that when you encounter him, you realize you've been looking at this guy for decades.
Yeah.
And there he is. And he's staring, and makes very intense eye contact. So he's incredibly charismatic. And part of that is this sort of self-involvement in a way for artistic purposes.
Yeah.
And part of it is also his sense, the sense that he could just get up and walk away and hitchhike down the road at any moment. You know, you never know. He's
keep
present.
on trucking.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, when I used to read his comics or look at them, read them, they were dark. To me, they were often very dark. He had a dark childhood. He had a mother with mental illness, right? And
Yes.
then there was mental illness in his family.
Yeah, that's right. His mother suffered from depression and anxiety for most of her life, and his two brothers were ill never really diagnosed, unfortunately,
Right.
but mentally and physically ill for their entire lives. And so that was all around him. And his father was horribly traumatized by World War II, by the things he saw there in the Pacific Theater. So Robert really survived an extremely difficult environment.
Yeah.
And
wasn't he hit
barely
at one point hit in the face by a glass ashtray that his mother was throwing at his father?
Yes. I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but the way he tells it is sort
Yeah.
of like as though, you know, it's a comic book.
Yeah, it
the
just
way he tells
happened.
it. Yeah,
Like, doesn't everybody
Gets
get hit
flung
by it?
and
Yeah.
there you go.
Right.
Yeah, during one of their fights, his mother threw the ashtray at his father, and instead it hit him in the forehead. Yeah, I mean, he saw a lot, which is why it was so important that he really focus on his comics, on his artwork, and get out of there when he did, when he was 19.
Yeah.
And go to Cleveland and sort of begin his life as a professional artist.
What surprised you about him?
What surprised me about him, in a way, was how present he is in the now.
Okay.
Which is to say, he wants to just talk about anything. His mind will go anywhere that you want to go. He's open to discussions about everything from, you know, trouser length
Yeah.
to paranormal activity to, you know, what it's like raising a child. Just, he's extremely open in that way and a wonderful conversationalist.
Isn't he also a little odd, like he's a big vaccine skeptic?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of having this sort of wildly open mind.
Right.
And also part of being isolated in the south of France. He doesn't have a computer. He doesn't, you know, have daily media intake.
Right.
And so, yeah, sometimes that means that he gets into sort of all far out theories.
He had
certainly.
2 children. One has since passed, but
Yeah.
both of them were artists themselves and are artists.
Yeah, strong genes.
Right? And really talented artists.
Very talented. And his living child, Sophie, his daughter, is a wonderful artist. And, you know, Robert's late wife, Aileen, who was Sophie's mother, was an incredibly important female cartoonist beginning in the early 1970s. So it really runs in the family.
Yeah, absolutely.
This incredible talent.
This is fascinating. All about the man we didn't really know. The book again is called Crumb. Dan Nadel, thank you very much. We're going to put the information on our website at katu.com. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
You bet. We'll be right back with more AM Northwest. Don't go away.